Good afternoon and hello, everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us for the Power of Unified IT series today. Today's webinar is the second installment of our five-part series, Identities Management. Ivanti's Identity Management is being presented by Ivanti's very own Luis Dunn. Now, Luis has been a sales engineer at Ivanti since Res was acquired in July of 2017. Prior to joining Res in April 2017, Luis was a senior engineer at Mattress Firm for 5 years. There, he implemented and managed Ivanti's Identity Director and Ivanti Automation, along with managing all other infrastructure systems. Luis has a thing or two under his belt. He knows what he's talking about. So today he's going to focus. He focuses on supporting enterprise accounts throughout the pre-sales process all across North America for Ivanti. He's a very busy man. Before we get started, Luis, let me introduce Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. We're founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in the IT space. We took the best ideas from these collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces, all using ITIL best practice. Our professional services can easily scale up or down to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing remote administration and support service offerings will enable your organization to focus on those normal day-to-day operations, saving you both precious time and money. Feel free to reach out to us directly at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Or visit our website at www.flycastpartners.com and chat with one of our IT specialists live Monday through Friday during normal business hours. I encourage you to check out all the different weekly webinars we have coming up. Obviously, this is webinar number 2. It's the second installment of this webinar series. So check out the rest of them. You might want to sign up for the one on ITAM and endpoint management we have coming up. Pretty insightful webinars. Invite your coworkers to sign up. I encourage you to feel free to research our services as well, our tool offerings and training offerings. We share various data sheets and white papers on our site that may be of use to you and your team. During this webinar series, we will be flashing a special code up on our screen, only for a few seconds, about 6 seconds. When you see this code, simply type it back to the host privately, that would be me, through the chat that is provided in this WebEx. If you provide me with the right code within that 2-minute time period, I will send you tomorrow a Starbucks gift card for you to have coffee on us. So you have 2 minutes to type the code, and after it's shown, it will be invalid after that time. In addition, for all those of you that attend all 5 webinars in this series and do the code for the Starbucks, you'll automatically be entered in a drawing for an Oculus. If you have any questions during our presentation today, I encourage you to type those in our Q&A section of this WebEx. We will definitely get back to you with answers during our WebEx today, as long as time permits, and Luis will answer as many as he can. And for those questions that we're unable to answer during the WebEx, we'll get back to you later on the day or by tomorrow. Give us about 24 hours. We'll get those answers for you. Now, without further delay, I'm going to turn this over to none other than Luis. Luis, it's all yours, sir. It looks like you're on mute. Let me unmute you.
Sorry.
There you go. You're unmuted. Go ahead, Luis. There you go.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate it. So as discussed, we're going to kind of go in, double click into kind of the 5 pillars of unified IT today. And what we're going to drill into is going to be around the Identity Director product, which couples with our Ivanti Automation product to deliver a solution around identity governance and administration. And yeah, I love questions, but if you guys have stuff, I'm happy to stop in the middle of the demonstration and keep this very interactive. So please feel free to ask any questions around the things we bring up today. So today's agenda, gone through some introductions. You've already heard me say the words around identity governance and administration. So we'll talk a little bit about how this fits into the overall umbrella around identity access and management. We'll get into a few PowerPoint slides around Identity Director, very high level, but just sets the stage to understand what Ivanti's Identity Director architecture looks like, and then also the kind of concept or methodology and how we work with your systems to streamline your business processes to ultimately kind of give you a new stance around how you provision access control. And then we'll get into the demonstration, and that's when we'll go through a few management portals. You'll get to see a live demo of me onboarding an individual. We'll review kind of our entitlement workflow, which is really just the orchestration engine behind our automation. And then we'll go through a role change. And as we go through the onboarding, as we go through the role changes, those specific things, you'll start to see how we have tasks that today, maybe manual, maybe automated, but oftentimes you have a lot of difficulty to understand how to trigger these different things, when, why, those types of things, right? So we'll get into to see how through our product we can streamline obviously the technical tasks of executing an onboarding and role change, but also seeing the business value of seeing how automated tasks set you up for kind of from a reactive stance to maturing to kind of a proactive stance in identity governance and administration. So I like to read this quote. Gartner released it a while back. It's around identity access and management. So identity access and management ensures the right people get the right access to the right resources at the right time for the right reasons, enabling the right business outcomes. So a lot of right ways to do something. So really for me, what this looks like in the production world of things is we start to aggregate all of your identity data. So who you're as an individual at your company. We correlate that with the access that you should have or have. And that gives us a system that we can then use to leverage kind of user context within your organization to drive the right access for you based on who you are within that organization. And as your role changes, again, that user context we're aware of enables us to continue to provision the right access based on your new role. So identity governance and administration is where Identity Director focuses in on. So you'll see kind of in this slide, you'll see we talked about kind of identity access and management being this overall identity umbrella. Where we fit is underneath this, where we start to really focus on the life cycle management of an employee, of a contractor, really managing the digital identity of an individual at your organization. So what's powerful about that and how that ties into unified IT, which we'll get into a bit, is as we look through job changes and an increased kind of focus around security and maintaining a kind of secure and compliant posture. Identity with the workflow and the ability to start to aggregate and correlate all the identity and access data together gives us a really mature business process solution to come in and control access from the birthright as soon as they're onboarded to as their roles change and as they're offboarded. So with that workflow, we start to then integrate with everything that individual has access to. So now you start to have a platform, an engine where you can go in and get reports and see who has access to what. And again, going back to that Gartner slide, right? Giving your organization a place where you can know why someone has access, when they were given that access, by whom, and for how long they have that access. So as we start to talk about how identity governance helps you just streamline the identity life cycle, it's not just the access management that we know behind the scenes. That the value for an IT organization is you start to really streamline the business process around just managing an individual access within your organization. Of course, that then leads us into the security side of things, right? Every organization goes through your typical onboarding, your role changes, and your offboarding. The difficulties there is as you scale up in an organization, you start to become a bigger and bigger organization in terms of employee count. The ability to continue to manage which typically is manual in terms of the provisioning of access or the deprovisioning of access becomes a really tough ask. I'll talk through it a little bit later in the demo, but when I did this as an engineer at Mattress Firm, we used to spend almost what seemed like it was about 1 to 2 weeks to onboard an individual. And you can imagine the black eyes that we received as a IT department as we weren't able to keep up. And that was kind of on us because things were manual. We worked in a retail organization, so job titles change all the time. Employees, of course, will change, and it becomes a very difficult task to keep up with to maintain the right access, and all while ensuring that you're compliant with your auditors and giving them a place to prove why someone has access. So as we're talking about a lot of this workflow and kind of the meshing and merging of an identity at your organization with their access and how that then starts to tie into other parts of IT. So for me, as I start, let's say at Ivanti tomorrow, my account is provisioned automatically based on my role. So as a sales engineer, I'd get access to all the right demo environments. I'd have the right security groups to give me access to the right folders and the right distribution lists, to maintain I'm receiving the right correspondence based on who I am. So a couple of things there. I mean, typically an infrastructure team or identity team will go in and service desk. They'll manage those types of things, and that's great. But oftentimes when it's time to give access to maybe the service desk system they have, an asset management system based on maybe that they have, or they have to just be able to say that person's devices, we need to make sure that we're able to map that into our asset management. And how does that even work with the identity kind of conversation anyways? What about the software they need, the look and feel experience they need on the desktop? So you can start to see a lot of times various service desk tickets will be opened up and then of course assigned to the different teams. Hey, Luis is starting tomorrow. Based on the sales engineer role, he's going to need these apps like a VMware workstation, Outlook, et cetera, PowerPoint, right? So what if there was a way to use this identity system, this workflow and orchestration to start to streamline those business processes and also, most importantly, automate and execute those transactions for individuals. So providing standardization and, of course, a real return on investment in terms of the time you save and also the end user experience side of things. Through kind of this unified or integrated approach, right? It enables end users to be ready to go day one. There's no waiting for access. Again, they start based on their role. We already take care of the access behind the scenes, but because of this integrated unified IT, we're able to then talk to our other systems, for example, Ivanti Endpoint Manager, to then say, hey, go put software on that individual's machine. Also with our User Workspace Manager, go make sure the look and feel experience of their desktop is consistent with their role. And of course, on the security side of things, go make sure based on the apps they have, the third-party apps, that we are patching those. Of course, we're maintaining the OS patching as well. And then as we do all these things, we want to make sure we have audits and we want to make sure our service desk team, our IT teams can go find a trail of what happened and when it happened. So as we're doing these things, we open up tickets in our Ivanti Service Manager, or if you have another service management platform like a ServiceNow or Sharewall or BMC, whatever that is, the ability to then integrate with those and open a ticket as we are doing these automated transactions. And the power there is you don't need to then have an individual manually open a ticket. We're opening the ticket for you automatically, and then as we complete the transaction, we're automatically resolving or closing the ticket with the actions that were taken, right? And this for me is a big one. So if you guys have questions here, like other use cases, workflows, and how using identity or in general, just kind of this integrated unified IT approach, please feel free to type them in and I'll be happy to address any. So here's kind of some of the, I'll call it marketecture, right? But for me, it's an easy way to consume what we're doing here, right? So we've talked a lot about aggregating the identity data, how we correlate that to the access that individual has, and how that creates kind of this identity warehouse. You'll often hear with reporting data lakes and things of the sort. This is that data lake for your digital identity within an organization, right? So we start to take in your HR system. So those are your Workdays, your ADPs, your UltiPros, SAP, et cetera, right? So we bring all that information, again, for employees. You potentially have your contractors or contingent workers in there. If they're not there, then we can grab them from wherever you have them. May that be a spreadsheet or just a separate database. The key thing is we're able to take in a source of truth or bring in multiple sources of truth to build that repository of identity and access data. What that then does is give us an engine to subscribe or unsubscribe individuals to entitlements, again, based on who they are and what access they should have based on who they are. Key thing here is we want to make sure that we're managing that individual's access across all systems, both on-prem and off-prem. And so that really bolsters kind of your IGA or your governance and administration component within the access management umbrella. So the fun part, we'll get into the demo. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit. Can you guys see my screen okay here? Like in terms as far as the text?
Yes, it's okay. Very clear, yes. Yep.
Okay. Cool. I'm going to grab the participant from our, all right, I see Caleb Clark. So we're going to onboard Caleb Clark. So what you're looking at today is this is Orange HRM. This is an open source HR system. This is not an Ivanti product. We use this just to kind of, for demonstration purposes, for you to see me actually onboard an individual in our environment, and then for our Identity Director product with automation to listen or to see that change, and in this case, just a new employee being added, and then how Identity Director listens for that and then acts on it. So going back to that, taking that sources of truth, putting it into the identity repository, and then again, that uses that information then subscribe people to entitlements. In this case, we give them the birthright entitlements. So just going to do a few things here, and we all know most of the folks on this phone aren't in HR, and you're not going to be doing this, but you're part of this process. You've been onboarded at your respective organizations. You'll go through role changes. We have good and bad experiences in terms of we get our access when we need and want it, and other times where it takes too long to get it right. This is what streamlines this business process, and for me, when I was an engineer, this is what was the most powerful part. Taking something that, like I said, would take 1 to 2 weeks to onboard an individual, and then getting to the point where we could have an individual onboarded as soon as they were listed as an active employee in the HR system. Or again, if there was a little bit different business policy, we could make that work as well for your organization. But the key thing was for us, which I love talking about and proud of, is within the first year of using this product, we automated over 2 million transactions, which is really powerful because you start to calculate what those soft and hard costs look like. And it was an impressive amount of money we saved the organization. But more importantly for us, it was just improving our kind of end user experience to the customers we served, right? We used to go back and talk about you're either selling or supporting, right? And that's a little bit different from organization to organization, but for us, supporting our sales and warehouse associates that ultimately were the driving sales force for Mattress Firm, this gave them the right user experience. They then became fans of IT. I think our IT score went from a 25% all the way up to like an 85% after a year and a half. So it's really impressive to see kind of the adoption. So when I talked about earlier, I want to take a moment just to highlight this. So as I've been talking, I'm on the transaction screen of Identity Director intentionally, so you can start to see transactions actually kick off on their own without me doing anything. Again, going back to kind of how we do things today, a lot of times it would be me going in and Active Directory users' computers and setting up Caleb Clark with the right permissions, putting him in the right security groups and distribution lists, all those types of things, going into Exchange or getting him a mailbox, going into potentially Salesforce, Concur, or all the different on-prem or off-prem apps we have, and you can start to see how long of a process that takes, right? And that's a process that would kick off usually when a service desk ticket is assigned to that team or individual. What's powerful about this is we're streamlining their process. In other words, we're automating a lot of these manual transactions and now giving them a different stance to say, hey, let's be proactive and let's start to think of new ways to refine our business processes or to better support the business, whatever that looks like. It puts you into more of a strategic position than a reactive position, right? So as this is a demo environment, I'll do a search for Caleb so you can see how many actually kicked off for him. We're looking at 11. And again, this is a scaled down environment. So in the production world of things, to kind of talk through what some of those things look like from an Active Directory and how we start to talk to the different systems and environments an individual may need access to, again, based on who they are. To give an idea how powerful this was for us, and part of those 2 million plus transactions I was able to help streamline was this piece for a normal employee out in the sales field at a mattress firm store. They get about anywhere from 65 to 80 something entitlements as a birthright entitlement. So when they come in the system, that's 80 different business processes we've streamlined for their organization and are just automatic. It's a real powerful type of return on investment and experience for the organization, all while keeping kind of actually providing more of a secure posture, right? Because you now are standardizing how you provision accounts based on the information you have within your HR system. But the one thing you don't see in here, I'll scroll down a little bit so you can, is right here where it says new computer request. So all this is I want this to be kind of an illustration for you guys to see how I alluded to it earlier, right? We talked to different systems, we automate those respective tasks. And then one of the things I talked about and how that complements or bolsters this unified IT conversation is we're going into these different systems, these different pillars, if you will, right? And we're provisioning or we're automating the tasks that those teams would be responsible for before the automation. So this one here where we talk about new computer requests, I'm actually using an API and it's going to Ivanti Service Manager, and we're going to hop over to Ivanti Service Manager so you can see we looked at Caleb Clark, right? So we'll have a new ticket in here assigned to the service desk. And again, this would probably be more likely assigned to your end user compute teams, right? Endpoint management teams. But I think you understand the power where we start to open a ticket automatically and submit it and assign it to a team. So this is part of, for me, a simple demonstration for it, but this is kind of a phase one, if you will, of how we start to bring unified IT together. Of course, I didn't mention this earlier, but of having your sources of truth drive what access is great, but the other part you don't think about a lot is actually providing kind of consistent naming across all your systems as well. Getting rid of the whole fat finger experience. So I'm going to scroll down and we're going to jump into an entitlement just to quickly see the kind of the magic behind the scenes, and I'll just touch on a few of these. As far as the attributes, and so this service right here, this entitlement is just driving really the provisioning or deprovisioning of this, let's call it an AD account, right, your SAM account name. So going into the attributes, we're able to build out our own attributes and give them different types. In this case, you're just doing a lot of text types. We're able to work with you and your HR department to come up with the right formula for usernames. That varies from organization to organization. We use 9 digits, with the leading digit being a representation if you're an employee, contractor, if it was a service account, if it was a shared mailbox, if it was an admin. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. And Ivanti, Flycast, we work with you to kind of figure out what makes sense there and build out your naming kind of policy. So we go in here, and I just want to show this real quick, the different types we can leverage. So we can build tables out, and that's really for something that you could leverage to pull data out of the table to then drive something in the workflow. So at the end of the day, this is just a great workflow engine behind our kind of how we're governing identity. The key thing is a lot of this stuff, especially something simple, like we're looking at a Windows user account, SAM account name, writing scripts for these things, or your email side of things. That's pretty straightforward. Those are all easy, very well documented in general across anywhere on the internet, right? What's powerful here is now you have a scale. I can write PowerShell scripts all day, but it's hard to build scale in terms of telling your script when to run, other than having done those reoccurring. There's a reoccurring task or some sort of scheduled basis. What's powerful about this is we're now pulling in from different sources of truth, again, using that identity warehouse to drive, to populate these placeholders within our workflow. So we'll look at the kind of the qualification or the policy engine, as I like to call it. This is going to change. Some organizations will have it, everyone qualifies. In this case, we just have it where we're just populating a location and a company as we go through the onboarding process. But again, this is, we can do different things with this. As we go down and look at the restrictions, and one thing I'll talk about criteria real quick for a second before I switch to restrictions is, as you start to bring in all that data, potentially things like around like a cost center or job titles, using that information, again, gives you this granular approach in how you can manage when this transaction or this entitlement kicks off on the delivery of it, as well as also when someone no longer meets those qualification criteria, we then kick off the return side of the workflow. So being able to correlate and kind of combine, give that whole SQL and or NOR type of experience where you can say, combine this cost center with this job title and this location, then kick off this, this entitlement is really powerful. We all get those weird types of requests from organizations, different departments we work with, and having the ability to get granular is really important and keeps you kind of agile with those ever-changing business processes. So restrictions and dependencies are really just kind of your segregation of duties. This is just where we can start to build logic, or we can start to build kind of a Lego block like feature where you can say as a dependency, there won't be a dependency on this particular one, but on the email account side of things, one of the dependencies would be that this entitlement is successfully delivered before any other entitlements kick off. So you can start to get really creative in how these workflows are kicked off and in which sequence, and of course maintain that segregation of duties. So workflow, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in here, but I just want to highlight the flexibility on the workflow side of things. So we're just going to look at a couple of things here. It's going to be around the delivery, or really the trigger that kicks off the delivery or return workflow. So we looked at the qualification engine right there, and that's a big piece of it, right? So as we are constantly maintaining, I'm sorry, not maintaining, but we have visibility into your sources of truth of that information that we're getting there, to kind of that repository for identity information. Those attributes are leveraged here. So as attributes change, your various entitlements will either deliver or return. And so as we look at automatic provisioning, that's what we're looking for. So it's just a simple mapping to say when people qualify, or another way to say, like, underneath that, to get more specific, only for newly qualified people if you're building a new service or trying to kick off a refresh for people that don't have that service yet. Of course, we have the specific times, and we can then key off other attributes. So we can get really granular in how you build out the trigger. But for me, the key thing is here, it's either a self-service or automatic trigger. And a lot of things we're looking at right now around automation triggering the different entitlements. In this case, kind of as attributes change in your source of truths. And the last thing I want to look at is just kind of the sub-actions that we have. This is just out-of-the-box kind of click-and-go features that you're just mapping variables to. So we looked at those attribute screen earlier, and I mentioned placeholders. So I'm not going to add something into this workflow, but just an example, just to show you something. So we'll say this one should have a attribute. Yep. So a parameter, and so this really just becomes a mapping from the attribute screen. We just map one of the attributes to the placeholder value field here, and then as I said earlier, we're just taking that information from your source of truth and then just going into that repository, into the qualification engine, and then again, if you qualify for the delivery, then that variable is just being passed into that placeholder. So it becomes a lot more like a mapping exercise, but gives you a real powerful engine to get granular in how you control access. You'll see that this workflow is relatively advanced with a lot of, if this happens at this stage, go ahead and do this, and if this happens this, a lot of your if-else type of logic, if you will. So let's stop here. Are there any questions in the chat window? Anything I need to stop for?
So far we don't have any questions, which I'm kind of surprised at. So folks, I want to remind you, if you have questions, go ahead and type those in the Q&A section of this WebEx, and Luis will answer as many of them as time permits. So folks, type your questions. Let's get some questions going.
Thanks. So we summed up kind of the entitlement quick review, right? I just want to get you a taste for what this is, and this is going to be the workflow that we're going to use to go and talk to our different systems, right? To go talk to your service management system, to go talk to your SCCM or Ivanti endpoint manager, Tiris, you name it, and go kick off that distribution of software based on some attribute change, right? That automatic trigger. And so we start to use this as an engine to drive access or to drive manual tasks to automated tasks and all your different disciplines of IT and what we call, pillars of IT, right? So the last part of the demo, going back to Caleb, he's moved. He's going to change roles. I'm just going to kick off a role change here, and again, just to highlight how the system listens for these changes, reads these changes, and then acts on them. So we've set up Caleb as a network admin, and he's going to have a new manager over there in that team. Going to assign him here. I think just to make sure I moved him. Yep. We're going to move him to Sydney. I'm just going to kick this off now. And we are going to see some transactions kick off in a moment. And it's going to kick off a manager change, and we're going to see a role change. I wasn't quick enough to switch over, but you can see already we've set manager ID. We changed his manager, changed his location, changed his title. So this is going to start to kick off other entitlements to update his access. And again, in your production world of things, you'd start to see an unsubscribing to the entitlements around what groups he should be a part of, and then a kind of a new subscription to the right entitlements that give him the right security or distribution groups based on that new role. I think I saw a question pop up in here. Is that right?
We do. Yes, we do have a question. Does this integrate with ADP there?
Yep, absolutely. So we can collaborate. So basically, we would synchronize the ADP. There's many different ways, and it changes from organization to organization. But yes, we can bring in kind of other CSV dump, ODBC connection, kind of looking at a SQL view. There's a number of ways we can go about that, but we can hook into ADP through their APIs, ultimately bringing in the fields that you want to bring in. And again, the key thing here is we're not bringing in everything. You're not going to see your Social Security, that kind of sensitive information in a system like this. but we'll be taking in the kind of HR approved information, if you will, your common things around your first name, last name, your email address, employee ID, those types of things.
Any other questions, folks? Now's the time to.
Yeah, I was going to say that kind of sums up the demonstration, and I just want to drive down the key part here is you know, as you go through this, it varies from org to org, but really it's the crawl, walk, run, and as you go through the implementation or the planning of something like this, it's just important to understand to take time to analyze your business processes to then prioritize which business processes you want to start to automate first. And oftentimes we'll work with just kind of a real quick and easy, let's get you to a good stance around onboarding, offboarding. And then based on that prioritization of tasks, then we can start to prioritize the different transactions we automate that drive kind of that attribute-based access control. And then that ties into how we then streamline how we work with the different pillars of IT, going back into the other teams of IT and streamlining those tasks for them. So if you have I can kind of concludes my part of the demonstration and open for questions.
Folks, if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. We do have a few moments left. We have about 5-6 minutes left. So if anybody has questions, let's go ahead and ask them now. You have Luis's undivided attention, so now's the time. For those of you that sent me the code, which was several of you will be receiving a Starbucks gift card from me tomorrow morning. I appreciate you participating in our little contest. We have this little contest each and every presentation we have. Today's Identity Director presentation presented by Luis Dunn of Ivanti, and he is a resident expert on this. So please take a moment to type in a question or two if you have it for him. We'd be happy to answer it for you. If there are no other questions, well, Luis, I'm going to thank you for your time today. We really do appreciate you helping us out on this. It's very much appreciated. Oh, wait a minute. We've got a question just came through. Hold on.
Cool.
Nope, they just said thank you for the presentation. It was a good one. All right, that's good.
Cool. If you guys have other questions that pop up, feel free to reach out to Flycast. Myself, I'm happy to get back to you guys or schedule time to take more of a deeper dive into some of the different areas we talked about. We work with organizations usually around kind of the identity side of this stuff that we've been talking about, but we often work with other organizations that are just looking for more of the business process automation around, could be something around infrastructure, just service requests and software and the automation of those things. So happy to expand those conversations with you guys on the side if you want.
And here is a question. Does this work with Okta, or is Okta not necessary with Ivanti?
I was hoping that question would come up. That's a very good question. I use both. And so Okta is probably one of the big players, big names in the identity access and management space. And then that gives you a really cool experience where you have an IAM and IGA product to work together. So what we did with Okta was we used this product, Ivanti Identity Director, to streamline how we, again, going back to that entitlement management side of things, ensured we had users in the right security groups. So we were able to then map security groups to your Okta checklist behind the scenes, which drives kind of the single sign-on side of things. And really what that did for us is as the roles change, we call that the Okta APIs. If not, you could just wait the hour for it to refresh. And the user, they sign in an hour after the role changes, or if we have it automatically done through the API, that user signs back into Okta, or we refresh our Okta page, and they have the new checklist based on the new role. So it's a really powerful experience when you start to streamline, put them together. There's definitely a reason why there's a big focus on the governance and administration side of things, because that's more of the that aggregation of data and the workflow on top of it, whereas IAM has a little bit different play there with single sign-on and privileged access management. So they really complement each other there. In fact, Ivanti is using both Okta and Identity Director. I use it as a customer, and you often see IAM and IGA products partner together very well.
Okay. Any other questions? And they said, excellent. Thank you, Luis. They appreciated your answer.
You're welcome. Good question.
It looks like we don't have any other questions, folks. Thanks again for joining us, and tune in next week. Next week we'll have the third part of this ongoing series, the third of our pillars of the joint presentation, Ivanti Flycast partners on the Ivanti Unified IT series. So please sign up and join us for IT Asset Management next week, the third of the 5 pillars that we're presenting on the power of unified IT. I want to thank everyone for your time today, taking time out of your busy schedule. Once again, I appreciate those folks that are participating in our contest and entering codes and winning gift cards and potentially an Oculus later on. So thank you. And Luis, enjoy the rest of your day. Don't work too hard, sir, because I know you're a very busy man.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day, everybody.
Take care. All right.